A racist police officer shot an elderly black man, suspecting him of car theft, not knowing that the man's son was a millionaire. What happened next didn't just turn the officer's life upside down, but also shook the entire police department. Are you curious to find out how this story unfolded? Let's uncover the complete truth and the profound lessons behind this event. But before we dive in, don't forget to share where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other captivating stories. Walter Jones, an 80-year-old gentleman, was the epitome of calmness and elegance in the small town of Westwood, where everybody knew each other. He had been a model high school teacher, dedicating his entire life to imparting knowledge and inspiring hundreds of students. Walter wasn't just a respected educator, but also a devoted father who always put his family first. Since retiring, Walter spent most of his time tending to the small garden behind his house, where he grew rows of roses that his late wife had loved. She had passed away many years ago, leaving a void in his heart, but Walter always felt her presence in every bloom he nurtured. He also frequently visited the town library to borrow books on history, his lifelong passion. It was his way of keeping his mind sharp and his heart at peace. Every week, Walter would drive his shiny silver Mercedes, a birthday gift from his son, Brian Jones, to the shopping center to pick up essentials. The car wasn't just a means of transportation. It was a heartfelt and meaningful gift. Brian, Walter's only son, was a successful businessman who had built a thriving career in finance. When Brian gave the car to his father, he couldn't hide his emotions. "Dad, you worked so hard your entire life to raise me and give me every opportunity. Now, I want you to live comfortably, without any worries," Brian said as he handed him the keys. At that moment, Walter looked at Brian in silence, his eyes filled with pride and emotion. He gently patted his son on the shoulder, saying nothing, but his warm smile said it all. That memory remained vivid in Walter's mind every time he sat behind the wheel. Every trip, even just to the grocery store, became a small but cherished moment. For Walter, the car wasn't just a symbol of Brian's success, but also a testament to the deep bond they shared as father and son. On a bright May day, as sunlight filtered through the lush green trees, Walter decided to visit the shopping center to pick up a few essentials. Carefully, he stepped out of his house, his frail but steady hands locking the door behind him. Dressed in a crisp white shirt, light brown trousers, and an old fedora, he was a familiar and comforting sight to the townsfolk. As the Mercedes glided through the streets, Walter softly hummed a classical tune. Passing by the park, he waved at a few old friends chatting on a bench. In contrast to the vibrant energy of the younger generations, Walter carried an air of calm dignity and composure. Arriving at the shopping center's parking lot, he carefully reversed into a parking space as he always did. Stepping out of the car, the sunlight gleamed off his neatly combed white hair. His eyes, though clouded slightly by age, still radiated kindness. He locked the car, pocketed the keys, and walked slowly but steadily toward the store. There seemed to be nothing unusual about that day, but Walter couldn't have known that an unexpected event was about to completely upend the peaceful life he cherished. When Walter stepped out of the grocery store, carrying a paper bag filled with essentials, the afternoon sunlight illuminated his silver hair, reflecting his innate elegance and calm demeanor. He wasn't in a hurry. His steps were slow but steady as he made his way back to his Mercedes, his mind occupied with simple thoughts. What should he cook for dinner tonight? But he didn't realize he was being watched. Not far away, Officer Jack Miller, clad in a crisp police uniform, was intently observing Walter. Jack, a tall, imposing patrol officer with a sharp, stern face, was known for his strictness but also harbored deep-seated prejudices. When his eyes landed on Walter, walking away from the luxurious Mercedes, a flurry of suspicious thoughts raced through his mind. How could such a modest-looking old man own a car like that? Could it be stolen? Jack stood still for a moment, his eyes scanning the car like a hunter sizing up his prey. The gleaming Mercedes, with its valid license plate and meticulously maintained interior, showed no signs of anything amiss. Yet, instead of feeling reassured, Jack found it even more suspicious. His long-standing biases created a distorted lens through which he couldn't view the situation objectively. As Jack approached the car, he examined it closely. His hand hovered near his belt, brushing against his radio as if preparing for a potential escalation. Peering through the car's windows, his eyes scrutinized every detail: the steering wheel, the leather seats, and the small paper bag Walter had left on the passenger seat. Despite finding nothing out of the ordinary, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to investigate further. Nearby, Sarah Parker, a woman in her early 30s, was about to get into her car when she noticed the peculiar scene. Sarah, a media professional with a keen sense for the unusual, immediately picked up on something about Jack's demeanor. His gaze. Wasn't that of a police officer simply doing his job? It was more judgmental, more accusatory. Sarah paused, her hand gripping her car keys but not moving to unlock her door. She stood still, watching intently, her eyes fixed on Jack. She noticed that his gaze wasn't just directed at the Mercedes, but specifically at the elderly man who had just exited the store. A sense of unease washed over her. Why was he looking at the old man like that? Was it just because he was driving an expensive car? Quietly, Sarah took out her phone and began recording, setting it to video mode. She sensed that something was wrong and instinctively knew she needed to capture whatever was about to happen. As Walter neared his car, Jack started walking toward him, his steps firm and deliberate. His hand hovered near his belt, where his radio and sidearm were securely fastened. In the otherwise quiet parking lot, Jack's presence created a tense, almost suffocating atmosphere. Walter stopped by his car, gently placing the paper bag on the passenger seat before checking his pocket for his keys. Just as he was about to unlock his car, Jack stepped closer. "Sir," Jack said, his voice firm and edged with cold authority, "is this your car?" Walter looked up, his kind eyes briefly flickering with surprise. "Yes, officer. This is my car," he replied calmly, his voice steady and untroubled. But Jack wasn't convinced. "Can you prove that?" he asked, his gaze scrutinizing every subtle expression on Walter's face. "Of course," Walter said, reaching into his pocket to retrieve the keys. "Here are the keys. This car was a birthday gift from my son." Jack frowned, his suspicion deepening. "Do you have the vehicle registration? Proof of ownership? Registration?" "I didn't bring it with me. I just came to pick up a few things," Walter replied, his tone still composed. "But if you'd like, I can call my son. He can send the paperwork over right now." Jack crossed his arms, his expression growing colder. "Digital documents? Those are easy to fake." From a distance, Sarah continued recording, her unease growing with every second. She could see the unfairness in the way Jack was treating Walter, and it made her blood boil. "This isn't right," she thought, tightening her grip on her phone and preparing to document everything that might happen next. The air in the parking lot seemed to grow heavier. Walter, with his paper bag still on the seat, stood in front of the officer, who looked increasingly threatening. At that moment, Walter had no idea that his peaceful life was on the verge of being completely upended. Walter looked up, his eyes momentarily reflecting confusion as he faced the officer standing before him. Despite the escalating tension, his voice remained calm and steady. "Officer, as I've already said, this car is mine. Here's the key. I wouldn't be able to drive it without it, would I?" He held up the key, attempting to reason logically, but Jack Miller, the patrol officer, didn't seem interested in listening. He crossed his arms over his chest, his cold gaze sweeping Walter from head to toe. "A key proves nothing, old man. You could have taken it from anywhere or anyone. I need to see the car's registration, or I'll have to treat this as a stolen vehicle case." Jack's words struck a heavy blow to Walter's pride. In his 80 years of life, he had never been questioned about his integrity or actions. A man of honesty and principle, Walter had always believed that clear explanations could resolve any issue. This time, however, his words felt like echoes in the ears of someone whose biases had already made up their mind. "Listen, officer," Walter said, his voice warm but tinged with fatigue. "I didn't bring the car's paperwork with me because I only intended to stop by and grab a few items. But if you could give me a moment, I can call my son, Brian. He can send the documents over the phone right now. I believe that will settle everything." Jack let out a mocking laugh, his eyes filled with disdain. "Documents over the phone? Do you think I'm going to trust something that can easily be forged? No, old man. If you can't produce original paperwork right now, I'll have to treat you as a suspect and handle this accordingly." The baseless accusations left Walter feeling both helpless and indignant. "I've already explained," he emphasized, his eyes now reflecting a determined resolve. "This car is mine. If you'd like, you can verify it in any way you see fit. But I haven't done anything wrong, and I don't believe I deserve to be treated like a criminal." Jack, however, remained unmoved. To him, the situation seemed crystal clear. A modestly dressed old man driving an expensive car, this alone was reason enough for suspicion. Instead of listening, he took a step closer, his hand resting on his belt where his radio and firearm were securely fastened. The gesture, though silent, sent a clear message. "I have authority, and I'm prepared to use it if necessary." From a distance, Sarah Parker continued recording the entire incident on her phone. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. A police officer, instead of upholding justice, was abusing his power to intimidate an innocent elderly man. Why won't he listen? Why is he treating this man like a criminal? These questions swirled in her mind, fueling her determination to document every detail. A few passers-by in the parking lot began to notice the confrontation. Some stopped to watch, their eyes shifting between Jack and Walter, but none dared to intervene. The once peaceful atmosphere of the parking lot was now thick with tension and unease. "All right, officer," Walter said, his voice now carrying traces of weariness and resignation. "If you don't believe me, call my son right now. He can confirm everything. I have nothing to hide." But Jack shook his head, his tone growing harsher. "Don't you understand? This isn't about your son or anyone else. I'm asking you to provide proof of ownership. If you can't, I'll have no choice but to detain you." Sarah, still recording from afar, held her breath. She could see the helplessness in Walter's eyes. A dignified, elderly man, simply trying to explain the truth, now found himself up against the rigid prejudice and authority of someone who should have been protecting justice. The air seemed to freeze as Jack took another step forward, closing the distance between himself and Walter. A few people in the small gathering crowd quietly pulled out their phones to record the scene, but none stepped forward to help. Walter, though feeling the weight of the injustice against him, maintained his calm demeanor. "Officer, you're making a mistake," he said, his gaze meeting Jack's directly. "I haven't done anything wrong. I just wanted to buy some groceries and go home. I don't understand why you're treating me like this." But Jack's cold, unyielding stare didn't waver. "This is my final warning," he said, his voice heavy with authority. "Either you produce the paperwork, or I'll have to take you in." The tension in the parking lot reached its breaking point. The golden rays of the late afternoon sun reflected off the Mercedes, a stark reminder of the peaceful life Walter had once known, a life now on the brink of being shattered. Despite his efforts to explain, it was clear that Walter, still maintaining his calm demeanor, raised his hands in a final effort to emphasize his innocence. "I haven't done anything wrong," he said, his voice warm but now tinged with fatigue. "If you don't believe me, let me call my son right now. He can confirm everything." Jack Miller, still standing opposite Walter, stared at his gesture as if it held some kind of hidden threat. At that moment, Jack's deeply ingrained biases and excessive vigilance clouded his ability to assess the situation rationally. As Walter raised his hands, Jack felt a surge of adrenaline, his mind instantly sounding the alarm. He might be reaching for a weapon. "Don't move!" Jack shouted, his voice sharp and cutting, echoing across the parking lot. Before Walter could comprehend what was happening, a deafening gunshot shattered the once peaceful atmosphere. The sound reverberated through the parking lot, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. A sharp, searing pain shot through Walter's leg, and he collapsed to the ground. The bag of groceries he had been holding fell from his grasp, apples rolling out in all directions, creating a chaotic scene. Walter groaned in pain, blood pouring from the wound in his leg onto the cold concrete below. The searing pain was almost unbearable, but he fought to remain calm. His frail hands trembled as he tried to hold his leg to stem the bleeding. Despite the agony, he didn't lose his composed tone. "Officer, I've done nothing wrong. This is my car. You're making a serious mistake." Jack Miller stood there, his gun now holstered, but his expression remained cold and stern. He ignored the blood pooling beneath Walter's leg and the murmurs of protest coming from the growing crowd around them. Without a second thought, he bent down, grabbed Walter's arm, and slapped handcuffs on him, showing no regard for the bleeding wound. "You're under arrest on suspicion of car theft," Jack announced authoritatively. Yet, for a brief moment, a flicker of doubt crossed his eyes. Was he really in control of this situation? Walter winced in pain as the cold metal cuffs tightened around his wrists. Still, he tried to maintain his composure, though his breathing grew labored. "I've told you. This is my car. Call my son. He will confirm everything." "There's no time to call anyone," Jack snapped. "If you can't produce the paperwork here, I'll handle this my way." The crowd around them grew increasingly impatient. Some people began shouting, "He's hurt! Can't you see that? Let him go. He needs a doctor, not handcuffs. This is an abuse of power. We're recording everything." The crowd's protests grew louder, with some recording the scene on their phones while others tried to call for help. Still, no one dared to step closer to Jack, either out of fear or a desire to avoid escalating the situation further. What would you have done at this moment? How can we protect the vulnerable from abuse of power? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sarah Parker, who had been recording the incident from the start, stepped closer to the scene. She shouted, her voice filled with anger. "Can't you see he's bleeding? You shot him, and now you're treating him like this? Who's going to take responsibility for this?" But Jack ignored her and tightened the handcuffs on Walter's wrists. Blood continued to drip from Walter's leg onto the ground, mixing with the spilled contents of his grocery bags, creating a heartbreaking and chaotic scene. A short distance away, a man in light blue medical scrubs appeared. It was Michael, an off-duty paramedic who happened to be in the parking lot. Seeing the dire situation, Michael immediately rushed toward Walter. "Stop!" Michael shouted at Jack. "Can't you see he's losing blood? I'm a paramedic. Let me stop the bleeding before it's too late." Jack turned to face Michael, his icy stare sharp and unyielding. "Nobody gets closer. This is a police matter." Michael didn't back down. He took a step forward, pointing at the wound on Walter's leg. "If he loses too much blood, you'll be held responsible for not letting me help. You think you're handling this properly, but you're putting his life at risk." Jack shook his head, his expression resolute. "I've already said, this is a serious situation. If you don't back off immediately, I'll be forced to ask you to leave." Michael, glaring at the blood still pouring from Walter's leg, gritted his teeth, but reluctantly stepped back. "Fine," he said, his voice laced with anger. "But you'll answer for everything that happens." From a distance, Sarah shouted again, "He's right. This man needs medical attention now. You can't keep treating him like this." Meanwhile, a middle-aged woman in the crowd, Linda, decided to act. Hearing Walter mention his son, she quickly pulled out her phone and searched for information on Brian Jones, a well-known millionaire in the area. After a few moments, she found his contact information through a news article and dialed his number. On the other end of the line, Brian's voice came through calm and steady. "This is Brian Jones. How can I help?" "Hello?" Linda said quickly, her voice filled with urgency. "I'm at the mall parking lot. Your father, Walter, is in serious trouble. He's been shot by a police officer and is bleeding badly. You need to come here right away." Brian froze, stunned by what he had just heard. "My father's been shot?" he repeated, his voice shaking with shock and fury. "Yes," Linda confirmed. "The officer accused him of stealing a car, but it's clear he's innocent. We're trying to help him. Please come as fast as you can." Brian responded immediately, "I'm on my way. Please do whatever you can to keep him safe." Linda hung up, her face filled with worry as she looked back at Walter, who was now kneeling on the ground, his face contorted in pain. She turned to Sarah, who was still recording everything. "I called his son," she said. "He's coming right away. Keep recording everything." Sarah nodded, her eyes burning with determination. "We won't let this go unnoticed," she said firmly. In the distance, the sound of ambulance sirens began piercing the tense atmosphere, breaking the silence that had enveloped the scene. But for Walter, every second felt like an eternity. The blood continued to flow, the pain persisted, and his only hope was that justice would soon prevail. Jack, standing rigidly with his stern expression, now seemed to feel the mounting pressure from the crowd and the growing criticism around him. Yet he refused to back down, holding steadfast to his actions even as the situation spiraled further out of control. Immediately after receiving the call from Mrs. Linda, Brian Jones set aside all his work. He left the office feeling both angry and anxious. Throughout the drive to the police station, his mind was racing with a barrage of questions. What had his father done to be treated this way? Why would a frail, harmless old man like him be shot and arrested? In less than 20 minutes, Brian arrived at the local police station. He pushed the door open with determination blazing in his eyes. He immediately approached the reception desk where a young police officer was on duty. "I am Brian Jones," he said, his voice clear but tense. "My father, Mr. Walter Jones, has just been brought here. I want to see him immediately." The young officer looked up at Brian with indifference. "Sorry, but we need to verify some information before allowing you to see him. Please wait a moment." Brian frowned. "He's seriously injured. You shot him and arrested him without cause. I want to see my father right now. It's my right." The officer shrugged, showing no urgency. Administrative procedures need to be followed properly. If he is being processed, you will have to wait. Brian clenched his fists, trying to control his rising anger. He took a deep breath and pulled out his phone to call his attorney, Mr. Charles Smith, one of the leading human rights lawyers. "Charles, I need you right now," Brian said quickly as soon as the call connected. "My father has just been wrongfully arrested by the police. He was shot and is currently at the local police station. They won't let me see him." Charles Smith replied in a calm yet firm voice, "Stay calm, Brian. I'll be there right away. In the meantime, gather as much information as you can. If there's evidence, especially video or witnesses, keep it all. We will need everything to protect Mr. Walter." Brian nodded, even though Charles couldn't see him. "I have some videos from the scene. I've also spoken with the person who filmed it and other witnesses. I need my father released immediately." Charles paused for a moment before saying, "I will contact the prosecutor's office and personally speak with the police chief. In the meantime, request an official report from them regarding the arrest and your father's health status. If they refuse, I will use legal means to compel them to respond." After ending the call, Brian looked directly at the receptionist officer. "My lawyer is on his way here," he said coldly, "and I won't leave until I see my father. If you think you can do this without facing consequences, you're making a huge mistake." The officer seemed to feel the pressure from Brian's determined stance and appeared hesitant. He grabbed a radio and spoke briefly with someone inside the station. "Wait a moment. I'll check on things," he replied, his tone less indifferent now. Brian stood there, his gaze fixed on the officer. Inside him, anger and worry churned violently. What had his father endured here? Was he okay? These questions only fueled his determination to bring everything to light. Just a few minutes later, Charles Smith entered the police station with a professional yet resolute demeanor. He scanned the room before moving toward Brian. "Have you spoken with them?" Charles asked. "They're still stalling," Brian replied, his eyes still on the reception desk. Charles nodded and then approached the young officer. "I am Charles Smith, representing Mr. Walter Jones. Under the law, my client has the right to medical attention and to see family members. I demand to see him immediately, or I will escalate this matter." The young officer looked flustered, but maintained a calm facade. "I'll have to consult my superior," he said. "Then do it now," Charles replied authoritatively. As the officer walked away, Charles turned to Brian. "We are not only demanding access for your father, but also ensuring they don't inflict any further harm on him. I will request to see video footage from the scene and Mr. Walter's health report. If necessary, we will use witness videos to prove their misconduct." Brian nodded firmly, determination shining in his eyes. "I don't care how long it takes. I won't let this go without justice." Charles gave his shoulder a reassuring pat. "We will make it happen, Brian, and they won't be able to evade responsibility." Both stood there waiting for feedback from inside the police station, resolute that they would do everything necessary for Mr. Walter's freedom and justice to be served. While Brian and attorney Charles Smith were waiting, the atmosphere in the police station grew more tense than ever. Charles's firm requests began to spread, drawing the attention of the officers. Eventually, news of the incident reached Chief Henry Carter, a seasoned man known for his integrity. Henry Carter stepped out of his office with a serious expression. He was tall, with silver hair and an authoritative demeanor, but his eyes sparkled with sharpness. Having met Brian at previous community meetings, Henry immediately recognized him and understood that this situation needed to be taken seriously. "Brian, Charles," Henry called as he approached. "I just received a report about Mr. Walter Jones's case. It seems there has been a serious incident. Follow me. We will review everything." Without hesitation, Brian and Charles followed Henry into the station's surveillance room. Inside, a large screen displayed security footage from various areas. Henry signaled to a staff member at the computer. "Retrieve the CCTV footage from the shopping center parking lot at 2 p.m. today. I want to see the entire incident." The video was quickly rewound and played on the screen. Brian stood still, his gaze fixed on it while Henry clasped his hands behind his back, scrutinizing every detail. Walter appeared on screen, first stepping out of the store with grocery bags in hand, then being approached by Jack Miller, who began to question him. Jack's voice was inaudible through the CCTV, but his body language spoke volumes: tense, aggressive, and uncooperative. As the video continued, Walter raised his hands to emphasize his explanation, followed moments later by Jack drawing his gun and shooting Walter in the leg, plunging the room into silence. Brian clenched his fists, struggling to contain his anger. Henry, with furrowed brows, instructed the staff to rewind the shooting moment. This time he leaned closer to the screen, focusing intently on Jack's actions. His eyes flashed with anger as he realized Jack had completely misunderstood the situation, leading to an unjustifiable action. When the video ended, Henry turned to Brian and Charles. His voice was deep and heavy. "No further evidence is needed. Officer Miller's actions were not only wrong, but extremely irresponsible. This is a serious case of abuse of power." Brian, though furious, maintained a calm tone. "My father was shot and treated like a criminal, even though he was completely innocent. I want to know how this will be resolved, Henry." Henry nodded with a serious look in his eyes. "Brian, I understand your outrage. Let me assure you that I will personally handle this matter. For now, I will order Mr. Walter's immediate release and have him taken to the hospital for treatment. After that, we will launch a comprehensive investigation into Jack Miller's actions." Charles, regaining his professional composure, added, "Henry, we also request all reports related to this incident, including documentation regarding Officer Miller's personnel file. This is not just a minor incident. It concerns a person's life and dignity." Henry nodded in agreement immediately. "Charles, I will provide everything you need. Trust me, this matter will not be covered up." Chief Henry Carter wasted no time. He turned to a senior officer nearby, his voice authoritative. "Release Mr. Walter Jones immediately. Take him to the hospital by ambulance and ensure that medical personnel accompany him. I want him to receive medical care as soon as he leaves here." The officer nodded promptly and left to carry out the order. Brian stood there, watching every action with a mix of worry and determination. "Henry, I will follow the ambulance to see my father, but I want to know, what about Jack?" Henry looked at Brian, his eyes serious. "Jack Miller will have to answer for all his actions. I've ordered him to report to my office right now for a statement. I will also suspend him while the investigation is underway." Meanwhile, on the other side of the station, a medical staff member was escorting Mr. Walter out of the holding room. His leg wound was bandaged but still bled through the dressing, and his face showed clear signs of fatigue. As he was placed on a stretcher and prepared to be taken to the ambulance, he looked around, his eyes reflecting sadness, but no blame. Brian immediately rushed to his father's side. "Dad," he called out, his voice filled with emotion as he saw Mr. Walter lying on the stretcher. Mr. Walter looked at his son, a faint smile appearing on his face. "Brian, I didn't think you would have to see me like this," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Brian bent down and grasped his father's frail hand. You don't have to worry anymore. I'm here now. We will get through this, Dad. I promise." The scene moved those around them deeply. Sarah, who had been watching from a distance, paused her video recording for a moment to wipe away her tears. As the ambulance left the police station, Brian sat next to his father, holding his hand tightly. Mr. Walter, though still in pain, tried to keep his voice steady to reassure his son. "I didn't want you to see me like this, but I know you will do everything to bring justice." "You don't need to say anything more," Brian replied, his voice choked with emotion. "I won't let this go unanswered. I promise you." Meanwhile, at the police station, Jack Miller had been summoned to Chief Henry Carter's office. As he entered, Jack maintained a tough demeanor, but his eyes betrayed anxiety upon seeing Henry waiting for him. "Sit down, Miller," Henry said in a low and sharp tone. Jack took a seat, trying to remain calm. "Chief, I was just following procedure when handling a suspected theft situation." Henry interrupted him, his voice filled with controlled anger. "Procedure? Do you call shooting an innocent old man procedure? I just reviewed the CCTV footage, and what I saw was an unacceptable abuse of power. You had no justification for your actions." Jack fell silent, unable to refute the clear accusations. Henry continued with a cold stare. "I am ordering your immediate suspension. A comprehensive investigation will be conducted, and I will ensure that you are held accountable for every mistake you make." Jack lowered his head, realizing that the situation had completely spiraled out of his control. At the hospital, Mr. Walter was taken into the emergency room. After doctors assessed and stabilized his wound, he was moved into recovery. Brian sat beside his father's bed, worry etched on his face, but also unwavering resolve. When Mr. Walter opened his eyes and saw Brian still there, he gently said, "You are my greatest pride, Brian. I knew you wouldn't let this end like this." Brian nodded firmly, determination shining in his eyes. "Don't worry, I will do everything to ensure justice is served. No one can escape responsibility for what they have done to you." Outside the hospital room, Charles Smith was tirelessly working as well, contacting witnesses and preparing necessary documentation. With the support of an experienced attorney and Brian's determination, everything was just beginning, and those responsible would have to pay for their actions. While Mr. Walter was receiving care at the hospital, and his family focused on ensuring he was treated fairly, a powerful wave of public opinion began to spread outside. The video recorded by Sarah Parker at the scene, capturing all of Jack Miller's actions and Mr. Walter's painful reactions, quickly became the center of attention on social media. Within just a few hours, the video was shared millions of times on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Prominent networks and influential figures began sharing it with outrage-filled posts. How can this still happen in the 21st century? Justice for Walter. No one deserves to be treated like this. The police must be held accountable. We need to act now to end violence and abuse of power in law enforcement. Stop police brutality. Among those speaking out were celebrities, including actors, musicians, and social activists. A post from famous singer Lisa Taylor, who has over 10 million followers, garnered particular attention. Watching this video brought me to tears. An 80-year-old man, simply trying to explain the truth, was shot and treated like a criminal. We cannot let this continue. I will join every protest to demand justice for Mr. Walter. Justice for Walter. Additionally, major human rights organizations such as Amnesty International, NAACP, and Human Rights Watch issued statements calling for an independent investigation into the incident and urging local authorities to take immediate action. Shortly after, Protests began outside the police station where Jack Miller worked. Hundreds gathered with banners and slogans. Justice for Mr. Walter. End violence and bias. No one is above the law, not even the police. The crowd grew larger as more residents from neighboring areas joined in. Notable activists like Lisa Brown, a leading figure in the anti-police violence movement, took the stage to speak. Mr. Walter's story is not just an individual story. It is the story of many who have been abused by a system that should protect them. Today, we are not only demanding justice for Mr. Walter, but also demanding change for all who have suffered this injustice. Lisa's speech was broadcast live on multiple social media platforms, further amplifying attention and spreading the movement's message. Meanwhile, Sarah Parker, who recorded the crucial video in the parking lot, received significant media attention. She was invited for a live television interview on a national news channel. Sitting in front of the camera, Sarah's serious face but determined eyes recounted in detail what she witnessed. "Sarah," the host began, "can you share with our audience what happened that day?" Sarah nodded, her voice clear and decisive. "I was in the parking lot shopping when I saw a police officer, Jack Miller, questioning Mr. Walter. At first I thought it was just a routine check, but the way he treated Mr. Walter made me feel something was wrong. So I decided to record it. I never expected things would escalate so quickly. Jack Miller drew his gun and shot Mr. Walter without any justification. Mr. Walter was completely harmless." The host continued, "How did you feel witnessing this incident?" Sarah took a deep breath. Her eyes reflected sadness and anger. "I felt it was so unfair. Mr. Walter posed no threat or did anything to warrant Jack Miller using his gun. I couldn't believe that an elderly man like him, who seemed gentle and polite, was treated like a dangerous criminal. What do you think needs to happen after this incident?" Sarah looked directly into the camera, her voice resolute. "I want to see justice. Jack Miller must be held accountable. But, more importantly, we need to change the system so no one else has to go through something similar. Incidents like this cannot continue." Sarah's interview quickly became a focal point on social media, with comments pouring in. "Thank you, Sarah, for bravely standing up. We need more people like her to expose the truth. Keep spreading this story. Justice must be served." While public sentiment boiled over at the hospital, Mr. Walter was gradually recovering under the attentive care of medical staff. Brian sat beside his father, his eyes glued to news updates on his phone. He saw that his father's story had transcended their family circle and become a symbol of the fight against injustice. Mr. Walter looked at his son with a weak smile. "I didn't think my story could draw so much attention." Brian squeezed his father's hand tightly, his gaze steadfast. "Dad, this is not just about you. It's for everyone who has been treated unfairly. I won't stop until justice is served." Mr. Walter nodded with hope shining in his eyes. Outside, public sentiment continued to boil as preparations were made for stronger actions to ensure that this incident would never be forgotten. Under pressure from public opinion and widespread outrage, Chief Henry Carter immediately ordered a comprehensive internal investigation to clarify the incident. With close oversight from human rights organizations and attorneys representing Mr. Walter, the investigation was conducted with a commitment to transparency and fairness. In Henry's office, documents and evidence began to be collected. The CCTV footage from the parking lot, testimonies from witnesses like Sarah and others present at the scene, along Mr. Walter's health report, painted a clear picture. Jack Miller's actions were not only unprofessional but also a serious violation of police use-of-force protocols. Henry sat in front of the computer screen, reviewing the CCTV footage for the third time. The image of Jack shooting Mr. Walter in the leg without any signs of threat made him shake his head in disappointment. "There's no justification for this," he whispered, his voice heavy. Meanwhile, Jack Miller's records were also thoroughly examined. Reports indicated that he had been complained about multiple times by residents, with allegations including aggressive behavior, abuse of power, and handling situations without consideration. Although previous complaints had not escalated into violence, they indicated a clear trend. Jack often acted on instinct rather than reason. During the internal interrogation, Jack sat before the investigative panel, which included Henry Carter and several senior officials. Jack's eyes revealed his unease, but he still tried to maintain a tough demeanor. "Jack," Henry began, his tone serious. "The CCTV footage recorded the entire incident. Mr. Walter posed no threat to you. So why did you draw your gun and shoot him?" Jack took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Chief, I was just following my training," he said. "I was taught to always be ready in any situation that could become a threat. When he raised his hands, I thought he might be trying to draw a weapon." Henry leaned forward, his gaze icy. "Following your training? Are you saying you were trained to shoot an innocent 80-year-old man who posed no threat? Is that your justification?" Jack stammered but clung to his argument. "I just wanted to ensure my safety and that of those around me. At that moment, I didn't have time to think more." Another member of the investigative panel spoke up. "But you had plenty of time to listen to Mr. Walter explain himself, and you rejected every peaceful resolution he offered. This was not an act of ensuring safety. It was a clear abuse of power." Henry nodded in agreement with that assessment. He looked directly at Jack, his voice filled with disappointment. "Jack, what you did not only violated police conduct rules, but also betrayed the trust of the community we are responsible for protecting. This is not training. This is irresponsibility." As the investigation concluded, the panel quickly reached a verdict. Jack Miller acted entirely improperly and must be held accountable for his actions. Henry called a press conference to announce the investigation's results to the public. Standing before dozens of reporters and cameras, he declared, "After a thorough investigation, we have determined that Officer Jack Miller's actions in the incident involving Mr. Walter Jones are completely unacceptable. He has seriously violated rules and professional ethics. Therefore, we have decided to terminate Officer Miller immediately and forward the case file to the prosecutor's office for legal action." This announcement received widespread approval from public opinion. However, for Mr. Walter's family, this was just the first step in their journey for justice. At the hospital, when Brian read the news about Jack's termination decision, he turned to his father. "Dad, this is just the beginning. I won't stop until everyone involved is held accountable." Mr. Walter nodded, hope shining in his eyes. "I believe in you, Brian. Justice always takes time, but if you don't give up, I believe everything will turn out well." Outside, human rights organizations continued to pressure authorities to ensure that Jack Miller faced not only termination, but also criminal charges. Public sentiment remained heated as preparations were made for a longer battle, not just for Mr. Walter, but for others who had suffered similar injustices. A few weeks after the internal investigation concluded, Jack Miller was officially charged with abuse of power and excessive use of force. The case quickly became the focus of media and public attention. On the day of the trial, hundreds gathered outside the courthouse, holding banners such as "Justice for Walter Jones," "No one is above the law, not even the police." Inside the courtroom, a tense atmosphere prevailed. Mr. Walter's family, including Brian and attorney Charles Smith, sat in the front row. Mr. Walter, despite needing crutches to move, was determined to be present to witness the trial. As Jack entered, he maintained a silent demeanor, but his face clearly showed signs of anxiety. Beside him was his defense attorney, who attempted to persuade the jury that Jack's actions were a mistake made in a moment of stress. However, this defense quickly fell apart as the prosecution presented evidence. The CCTV footage from the parking lot, testimonies from witnesses like Sarah Parker, and Jack's history of complaints regarding abuse of power were all brought before the court. Each piece of evidence made it clear that Jack's actions were not just a mistake, but indicative of a long-standing pattern of irresponsible behavior. When it was Brian's turn to speak, he stepped up to the podium with determination in his eyes. "Your Honor," he began, his voice clear and emotional. "Today I stand here, not only for my father but for all those who have suffered similar injustices. My father, an 80-year-old man, just wanted to live a peaceful life, but on that day he was treated like a criminal, shot at, and humiliated simply because of bias and abuse of power." Brian took a deep breath, trying to contain his emotions. "I don't want anyone else to experience the pain my family has endured. I don't want our children to grow up in a world where those in power can abuse it without punishment. We are not seeking revenge, we are seeking justice. And justice demands that those responsible pay for their actions." The courtroom fell silent as Brian returned to his seat. His words not only moved the jury, but also helped those present understand the significance of this case. As the trial continued, the prosecutor concluded with a powerful statement. "Jack Miller has broken his oath to protect and serve the community. His actions have not only harmed Mr. Walter and his family, but have also shaken public trust in our legal system. We ask that the court impose a strict sentence to send the message that no one is above the law." After deliberation, the jury quickly reached a verdict. Jack Miller was found guilty of serious abuse of power and excessive use of force. The judge sentenced him to permanent dismissal from the police force, barred him from working in any law enforcement capacity, and imposed a 5-year prison term without parole. As the sentence was announced, Jack bowed his head, realizing that his career and life had been ruined by his irresponsible actions. Outside the courthouse, crowds cheered upon hearing news of the verdict. Sarah Parker, who played a significant role in bringing the truth to light, told reporters, "This is a victory not just for Mr. Walter, but for everyone who has suffered injustice. But the fight is not over. We need to continue fighting to ensure this system changes." In the hospital, when Mr. Walter heard that Jack Miller had been sentenced, he smiled gently. "I didn't want this to happen," he told Brian, "but I hope my story helps others avoid suffering like this." Brian nodded tightly, holding his father's hand. "Dad, we did it. Justice has been served. And I promise to keep fighting so no one has to go through what you experienced." The trial concluded, but its echoes continued to resonate as a powerful reminder of responsibility and ethics within law enforcement agencies. After the trial concluded, the life of Walter Jones's family gradually returned to normal, but the wounds, both physical and emotional, left a lasting mark. In the hospital, Mr. Walter had overcome the critical phase, but recovery was anything but easy. His leg, although healed, still bore scars, and his soul was riddled with invisible wounds. In the early days back home, Mr. Walter often found himself lost in nightmares about that fateful day. The sounds of gunfire, Jack Miller's cold gaze, and the feeling of helplessness haunted his sleep. However, each time he woke up, he always found Brian sitting beside him, his son's eyes filled with encouragement and determination. "Dad, we've made it through the hardest part," Brian said, gently placing his hand on his father's shoulder. "Now is the time to turn this pain into a lesson and take action to ensure no one else has to suffer the same way." With his significant influence, Brian began dedicating his time to campaigns calling for police system reforms. He collaborated with human rights organizations, organized community discussions, and used his voice to advocate for change. "My father's story is not unique," Brian said at a major press conference. "It exemplifies a larger issue within our system. We need a police force that not only enforces the law, but also understands, respects, and protects the community they serve." Meanwhile, Mr. Walter, despite still facing haunting memories, decided not to let the incident control his life. He began participating in community activities, meeting those who had supported him, and sharing his story as a lesson in patience and hope. As time passed, Mr. Walter's health gradually improved. One day, Brian invited his father to attend a large community event held in the town's Central Park. This event was organized to raise awareness about police abuse and call for reform. As the father and son entered the event area, everyone turned to look and applauded their arrival. Sarah Parker was also present, standing near the stage with an encouraging smile. "Do you think I should speak?" Mr. Walter asked, a hint of worry in his eyes. Brian smiled and held his father's hand tightly. "Just being here is a powerful message. Let me speak for you." On stage, Brian stepped up to loud applause from the audience. He took a deep breath and looked out at the crowd before him, which included supporters and families who had endured injustice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice clear and strong, "my father has gone through one of the most painful moments of his life. But my father's story is not just about him. It is about a system that needs change, a system that must not allow bias and abuse of power to continue harming those it is meant to protect." Brian paused for a moment, glancing at Mr. Walter, who was smiling gently from the stands. "My father always taught me that no matter how difficult things get, we must find ways to stand up, not just for ourselves but for others as well. Today, I am here for my father and for all those who have suffered injustice. I urge all of us to unite, continuously demand justice, and create the change we want to see." The entire crowd rose to their feet in applause. Sarah turned to Mr. Walter and said emotionally, "Thanks to your story, many people will be better protected. You have made a difference." Mr. Walter nodded with gratitude shining in his eyes. "I never thought my story could go this far. But if it helps prevent another pain like this one, then it's all worth it." The event concluded with an emotional moment as Mr. Walter and Brian stood together on stage, hand in hand. Two men from two generations sharing a common goal, bringing justice and hope to their community. In the warm afternoon sunlight that day, their presence became a symbol of family strength, faith in justice, and humanity's ability to change when united. Their story not only concluded with justice for Mr. Walter, but also opened a new path for the future of those who need protection. The story of Mr. Walter and Brian is a powerful testament to the importance of justice and solidarity. What do you think about the current law enforcement system? What do you believe we need to do to ensure justice for everyone? Please share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like and share this video to spread positive messages and subscribe so you won't miss future inspiring stories. See you in the next video.